This is the story of one of the most interesting cases I've been involved in, and it happened 23 years before I'd ever heard of the victim.
February 24th, 1986. The Los Angeles Police Department discovers the lifeless body of 29-year-old Sherry Rasmussen, scarred with severe injuries and tragically sprawled on the floor. Inside the house, the scene was chaotic. Furniture was tossed around, stereo equipment ripped from the walls, and a shattered porcelain vase spoke of the violence inflicted upon Sherry. For detectives, everything points to just one theory: a robbery that had turned deadly. But beneath the surface lay a truth which was the autopsy reports, as they were telling a different story.
The decedent had numerous points of trauma. She had 3 gunshot wounds to the torso, to the front of her. She also had blunt force trauma of the head and face. She had bruising, abrasions, and lacerations. That means that there was close contact between the assailant and her when she's being killed.
Something strange caught their eyes: a bite mark on Sherry's left arm. What exactly happened to Sherry? Was it truly just a robbery, or revengeful motive behind her tragic death? In May 1984, Sherry met a guy named John Rutan. They clicked right away and began dating. A year later, they decided to tie the knot, and John moved into Sherry's apartment. February 24th, 1986. John left their condo on Balboa Boulevard to go for his new job. Meanwhile, Sherry was supposed to give a motivational speech at work that day. Around 9:45 a.m., a neighbor noticed something odd. John's garage door was open, but there was no sign of any car. Before leaving, John had made sure all the doors were closed, so this was quite unusual. About 15 minutes later, John called home, but no one picked up. He figured maybe Sherry had gone to work, so he shrugged it off. But as the day went on, his calls continued to go unanswered. John started to wonder. However, after checking in with Sherry's secretary and learning she hadn't shown up for work, John's worry meter spiked. Meanwhile, Sherry's sister Teresa Lane also reached out, calling her office around 10 a.m. A twist in the tale emerged when a maid cleaning a nearby unit reported hearing what sounded like a heated argument, followed by a loud thud around 12:30 p.m. When John arrived home from work at 6 p.m., he sensed something wasn't right. The garage door, usually closed, was wide open, and Sherry's BMW, the one he had given her as an engagement present, was nowhere to be seen. Considering Sherry's earlier plans, it seemed odd that she would have left without telling him. As John walked closer to the garage, he spotted scattered pieces of broken glass and quickly realized where it came from. Above the garage was a small balcony, and its glass door had been smashed. John stepped into the house through the garage. There lay Sherry, sprawled on the floor with her body horribly injured. Her eyes were swollen, and she had cuts and bruises all over her body, even on her head and neck. By the time John found her, she had been lying there for a while, and her body was stiff and cold. John desperately searched for a pulse and tried to revive her, but sadly, there was no response. Being panicked, he dialed 911, and soon enough, the police and paramedics rushed to the scene. As the detectives combed through the crime scene, they were met with utter chaos in every room. Furniture was tossed around, and it was clear there had been a violent struggle. A broken porcelain vase hinted at the severity of the attack on Sherry. Adding to the eerie scene, they discovered a handprint of blood near the alarm system the couple had recently installed. It seemed Sherry had desperately tried to trigger the alarm to let someone know she needed help, but tragically, she couldn't quite reach it in time. Inside the house, it was clear that the struggle had been intense, especially in the lounge room. The detectives found tall stereo speakers, one of which had been ripped from the wall and left on the floor near Sherry's body. As they continued their investigation, they collected more evidence from both the scene and from Sherry's body. They dusted for fingerprints around the house and also used an assault kit to gather swabs from the bite marks they found on Sherry's arms. The detectives also discovered abrasions on Sherry's wrists, which suggested that she had been tied up with a rope or cord, which they found near the front door. It was clear she had fought so hard that her fingernails broke off in the struggle. Adding to the horror, They also uncovered evidence that she had been shot 3 times in the chest. This shocking revelation led them to conclude that despite all her other injuries, the gunshots were ultimately what caused her death. One bullet had gone through Sherry's body, leaving an exit wound on her back, while the other 2 were found inside her. It was clear they were shot from a .38 caliber handgun fired at very close range. Adding to the mystery, detectives found a colorful quilted blanket on a chair in the living room. It had 2 holes and powder burns, which was suggesting that it was used to muffle the sound of the gunshots. With all this evidence, the police swiftly concluded that this was no ordinary crime. It was a botched robbery gone terribly wrong. According to the police, it seemed like at least 2 criminals broke into Sherry's apartment, but they didn't expect her to be there. So a fierce struggle broke out between them and Sherry, who fought bravely until the end. Several clues pointed toward a robbery gone wrong. First, Sherry's car was missing from the garage, indicating the robbers' intent to steal. Secondly, stereo equipment and a player were found near the staircase, which suggested the thieves planned to take them before the confrontation. However, things took a deadly turn during the scuffle, leading to Sherry's tragic murder. But this robbery theory had its flaws. First, the police didn't find any signs of forced entry. This meant the criminals either had a key to Sherry's apartment, or she let them in herself. Secondly, all valuable items, including a jewelry box, were left untouched, which raised doubts about the motive behind the break-in. Despite interviewing all of Sherry's neighbors, detectives came up empty-handed. While some residents heard sounds of a struggle, none of them reported hearing gunshots or seeing anyone enter Sherry's apartment. Experts also collected blood samples and fingerprints from the house, hoping to find clues to solve the case. However, DNA analysis wasn't possible at the time in the 1980s. To gather more evidence, the lead investigator had an idea. He took a piece of cotton and dabbed it on the bite mark found on Sherry's body. He hoped that if the attacker's saliva was left behind, it could be a vital clue in catching the killer. After their thorough search of the apartment, detectives stumbled upon an intriguing detail. The criminals had taken only one item, which was Sherry and John's marriage certificate. This raised eyebrows and suspicions, especially towards John, who was closest to Sherry, and could have had easy access to the apartment. However, John was quickly ruled out as a suspect in his wife's murder because he had a solid alibi and no apparent motive. In fact, he was the one who informed the police about the missing certificate, further clearing his name. At the time, detectives couldn't make sense of why the criminals took only Sherry and John's marriage certificate. Still stuck on their robbery theory, they focused on finding the perpetrators. After a week and a half of searching, they made a breakthrough. Sherry's car was found in a parking lot, 4 kilometers from her apartment.
We canvassed the whole San Fernando Valley burglary reports. And then a breakthrough. There had been a number of residential burglaries within the area, and the fact that there was a residential burglary a couple of weeks prior in a complex similar to this, not far away, where 2 suspects were observed. One of them did have a gun. We thought, wow, this is a great piece of investigative information for us.
In these incidents, 2 criminals would break into apartments through the garage, brandishing guns and stealing stereo equipment. The lead detective suspected that the same culprits might be behind Sherry's murder. They tried to track them down using witness accounts, creating rough sketches of the suspects. They also learned that both men were Latino. However, despite their efforts, the suspects were never found. This lack of progress frustrated Sherry's parents, who felt like investigators weren't doing enough to uncover the truth behind their daughter's tragic death. Nels Rasmussen, Sherry's father, wasn't convinced by the police's burglary theory. He regularly visited the police station, urging the detectives to consider other possibilities. He found it hard to believe that Sherry, who was tall, strong, and in good shape, could have been overpowered in a botched burglary. Nels was determined to get to the bottom of what truly happened to his daughter, pushing for a more thorough investigation into the case. Nels urged the police to look into John's ex-girlfriend, whom he didn't know by name because Sherry never mentioned it. However, Sherry did confide in her father about the unsettling feeling she got from the ex-girlfriend's unexpected visits. But who was this mysterious woman, and what was her connection to John? Well, her name was Stephanie Lazarus, and she wasn't just any ordinary ex-girlfriend. She was an LAPD officer. Right from the start, Stephanie developed strong feelings for John, but he remained oblivious to her romantic intentions. He saw her just as a good friend and was unaware of her deeper feelings towards him. To John, their relationship was nothing more than friendship, occasionally mixed with physical intimacy, and he assumed this was clear to everyone. Because of this, he never felt the need to discuss feelings with Stephanie or ask about hers. On the other hand, Stephanie was painfully aware of John's lack of romantic interest in her. So when Stephanie learned of John's engagement to Sherry on June 4, 1985, it was a crushing blow. That night, Stephanie dialed John's number and her voice was trembling as she pleaded, "I really need to see you. Please come over." Being concerned, John agreed and hurried to Stephanie's house. When he arrived, he found her still in tears, which worried him deeply. Despite knowing Stephanie for 7 years, he had never seen her so upset before. He tried to soothe her, but before he could say anything, Stephanie suddenly poured her heart out, confessing her love for him. "I love you," she declared. "I've loved you all this time. I just couldn't bear to see you marry someone else." John was taken aback by Stephanie's confession, but he was confident that their relationship had always been clear-cut. He gently explained to her that he didn't share the same feelings and that he was deeply in love with Sherry. However, despite his refusal, Stephanie persisted and pleaded with John one last time to sleep with her. Feeling sorry for Stephanie, John reluctantly agreed, but made it clear that it would be the final time they were together and that they could not see each other anymore after that. At this point, Sherry had no idea about the complicated relationship between John and Stephanie. Little did she know, Stephanie had more surprising schemes up her sleeve that would soon disrupt their lives. In August 1985, Stephanie made an unexpected visit to the Glendale Adventist Medical Center, where Sherry worked. Stephanie headed to Sherry's office for a private conversation. They closed the door, and their discussion lasted for a few minutes. When Stephanie eventually left, Sherry emerged from her office looking visibly distressed, tears in her eyes. It was evident to everyone that something had deeply upset Sherry. That evening, Sherry reached out to her father Nels and confided in him about the unsettling encounter with Stephanie. While she didn't disclose Stephanie's name, she shared the disturbing message she received. If John couldn't be with Stephanie, then he couldn't be with anyone else either. But Stephanie's intrusive behavior didn't end there. During her second visit, she showed up at Sherry's apartment and asked John to wax her skis. Despite Sherry's objections, John complied with Stephanie's request. Sherry found her behavior odd, especially considering she was dressed in flattering workout attire. After Stephanie left, Sherry confronted John and questioned him whether their relationship was truly over. John reassured her that he and Stephanie were just friends. However, a few days later, Stephanie returned to retrieve her skis, this time dressed in her police uniform and armed. Sherry grew increasingly unnerved by Stephanie's persistent visits and pleaded with John to put an end to them. However, John dismissed her concerns while insisting there was nothing more to their relationship and advised her to ignore Stephanie's action. But Sherry couldn't shake off her nagging suspicions about Stephanie's mysterious appearances and how she managed to bypass the security measures at their residential complex. On one occasion, while dining with John in a restaurant, Sherry caught sight of a hooded figure staring at them. The moment she glanced back, the mysterious person swiftly disappeared. Sherry couldn't discern his identity because his face was concealed. Being desperate for answers, Sherry's father shared these unsettling incidents with the detectives in the hope that they would take his concerns seriously. However, their indifference only deepened the family's frustration and anxiety. Detectives were certain that the murder was the work of the two men who had recently burgled an apartment near Sherry's residence. However, 3 months after the tragic incident, a curious turn of events unfolded. Several crucial documents pertaining to Sherry's case mysteriously vanished from the police station. These included the detectives' detailed records documenting the ongoing investigation's progress, yet inexplicably, they couldn't be located. This disappearance raised serious doubts. Was it a genuine mishap, or had someone intentionally removed these documents from the case files? The victim's family suspected foul play, especially considering the involvement of an LAPD officer in the case. However, there were no significant leads, and the case remained unsolved for years. 7 years later, when the lead investigator Mayer retired, Sherry's father saw it as an opportunity and decided to meet his successor, hoping for a more committed approach to the case. Sherry's father requested the detective to conduct a DNA analysis and even offered to cover the expenses. However, the detective dismissed the idea, deeming it pointless because they didn't have a suspect to compare the DNA profile with. The detective asked him to move on, maintaining their belief that Sherry's case was simply a botched robbery. Meanwhile, John moved on with his life and started a new family. However, a peculiar turn of events occurred when he reconnected with Stephanie and they made plans to travel to Hawaii together. But just before their trip, something unexpected unfolded. John contacted the police himself, inquiring about any new evidence that would link Stephanie to Sherry's murder. It turned out that John suspected Stephanie's involvement in Sherry's murder and was determined to seek justice for her. However, he kept this suspicion to himself for years and hesitated to speak about it, even though he continued his intimate relationship with Stephanie. 3 years later, she married a fellow officer and they adopted a daughter together, relocating to Simi Valley. Despite her impeccable reputation, Stephanie continued to meet John regularly and maintain their relationship. As time passed, it seemed like Sherry's murder would remain unsolved forever. However, in 2001, a glimmer of hope emerged when a separate cold case unit was established in Los Angeles to tackle unsolved murders. Sherry's case, along with thousands of others, was assigned to the detectives in this unit. Among the evidence was the piece of cotton that may have contained the perpetrator's saliva left behind after a bite during the attack. 2 years later, in 2003, detectives resumed their investigation into Sherry's case and sent all available evidence to the laboratory for DNA testing. However, it wasn't until December 2003 that a lab technician named Jennifer Francis began working on it. Due to a backlog of cases, they had to wait nearly 2 years for the results. Finally, in January 2005, Jennifer tested the blood samples from the apartment, as well as the fingernail clippings, and discovered that all the DNA belonged to Sherry herself. Now all that remained was to analyze the remaining sample from the bite mark on Sherry's body. However, there was a problem. The vial containing the sample couldn't be found for an entire day. After an exhaustive search, it was eventually discovered near the wall of a large refrigerator. It appeared as though someone had tried to remove all evidence linking to the killer, but by some stroke of luck, this crucial piece had been overlooked. After studying the sample, Francis detected that the DNA was from an unfamiliar woman. She quickly checked it against the FBI database, but to her surprise, there were no matches. Realizing the DNA belonged to a woman, she delved deeper and found a report about a third-party female who supposedly harassed the victim before her death, both at work and at home. Francis, curious about the possible connection, asked the detective overseeing her if this woman had been investigated. His response startled her. "Oh, you mean the LAPD detective." He went on to explain that the woman in question was a former girlfriend of the victim's husband and was currently serving as an LAPD detective. However, he quickly dismissed any involvement by stating firmly, "She's not a part of this." They didn't entertain other possibilities, and after hitting a dead end in their search for new leads, the case once again went cold. Sherry's case had its share of challenges, with progress often stalled by dead ends. However, in February 2009, a fresh opportunity emerged when Jim Nuttall and Pete Barbara took on the investigation in Van Nuys. They carefully reviewed the materials left by previous investigators. With the DNA evidence indicating a female suspect, they dismissed the burglary theory and realized they needed to retrace their steps from the beginning. Nuttall and Barba considered it as a murder rather than a simple burglary. They believed the burglary was staged to divert attention from the real motive. Several aspects of the crime scene didn't add up for a typical break-in, especially one that happened during the day. Sherry's jewelry box, an obvious target for thieves, was left untouched on her dresser. So they decided to make a list of all the women who could potentially be linked to Sherry's murder. After some investigation, they gathered 5 names, including one of Sherry's colleagues from work, 3 other young women, and Stephanie. Nuttall was surprised when John informed him over the phone that Stephanie was a police officer. At the time, Stephanie had been promoted to a higher rank of detective and was working on art theft cases as part of the Commercial Crimes Division. With the assistance of other investigators, they swiftly ruled out the 3 women from the list, as they lacked motives and had solid alibis. Next, they turned their attention to the nurse who worked with Sherry. The case file indicated that there were tense relations between them. so the police discreetly obtained a sample of her DNA from the trash she discarded. Experts analyzed the profile extracted from the sample, but found that it didn't match the saliva found at the bite mark. Consequently, the detectives were left with only one remaining suspect, Stephanie Lazarus. However, during this process, the detectives and their colleagues made a pact to keep this information under wraps until they could gather concrete evidence against Stephanie or rule out her involvement. By keeping it quiet, they aimed to prevent her from preparing a strong defense if she was indeed the killer. It was intriguingly convenient that Stephanie worked in the same building and on the same floor as them. So to maintain secrecy, they adopted numerous precautions, even avoiding mentioning her name in the notes. Instead, Stephanie was simply referred to as Number 5. As they delved deeper into Stephanie's life during the mid-1980s, they stumbled upon their first intriguing discovery. During the time of the murder, Stephanie owned a Smith & Wesson Model 49 .38 caliber revolver, the same type of gun used to shoot Sherry. Additionally, investigators discovered that Sherry had frequently complained about Stephanie's odd and sometimes aggressive behavior. The plot thickened when they learned that Stephanie had broken into Sherry's gated community and even into her apartment on multiple occasions. In a final blow, the detectives uncovered that just 2 weeks after the murder, Stephanie made a peculiar report at the police station. She claimed that her car, parked near the pier, had been broken into, and among the stolen items was a .38 caliber revolver. This revelation raised eyebrows among investigators, especially considering the circumstances surrounding Sherry's murder. It seemed highly suspicious that Stephanie would conveniently report the theft of a weapon similar to the one used in the crime. With Stephanie emerging as the prime suspect, the detectives wasted no time in informing their superiors. They devised a plan to discreetly collect a DNA sample for her, opting for a voluntary discard to avoid tipping her off about the investigation. For a whole week, undercover officers shadowed Stephanie's every move and waited for the perfect moment. Then, on May 28, 2009, their chance finally arrived. Stephanie and her stepdaughter popped into a cafe for a quick snack. As soon as they exited, the officers swiftly swooped in and grabbed the glass Stephanie had sipped from. Without hesitation, they sent it straight to the lab for analysis, hoping it would finally crack the case wide open. The following day, the lab delivered the results, and it was a bombshell. The DNA from Stephanie's glass was a perfect match to the DNA found at the bite mark from Sherry's body. It confirmed what the detectives had suspected all along. Stephanie was indeed Sherry's killer. The revelation sent chilling possibility that Stephanie may have been behind the disappearance of crucial documents from the initial investigation and erased any trace of her involvement. However, the undeniable DNA results left no room for doubt. With little time for contemplation, the investigators swiftly shifted their focus to developing a plan for Stephanie's arrest. The detectives even thought over the idea of apprehending Stephanie at her residence, but the thought of confronting her while she was with her husband and stepdaughter seemed fraught with risk. Instead, they brainstormed on how to compel someone of Stephanie's rank to surrender their weapon. Eventually, they hit upon a brilliant solution. The basement of the police department housed holding cells meant for temporary detention of criminals, where anyone entering had to surrender their weapon. This ingenious plan provided the perfect opportunity to safely arrest Stephanie without complications of her family being involved. Now, to lure Stephanie to the basement holding cells, the detectives devised a clever plan. On June 5, 2009, 2 detectives approached her with hidden microphones. They told her they had arrested a suspect who might have intel on stolen paintings. Since Stephanie was experienced in dealing with art thefts, they sought her expertise. Stephanie willingly agreed to assist and accompanied the detectives to the basement where the suspect was purportedly held. As she surrendered her weapon, the first part of the plan fell into place. However, upon reaching the interrogation room, Stephanie was in for a surprise. Instead of finding a suspect, the detectives meticulously and cautiously began revealing their cards one by one.
We're talking about being busy and stuff. We've been assigned a case that we've been looking at.
Okay.
It's a new case, and reviewing the case, there's some notes to see as far as your name being mentioned.
Okay.
Do you know John Rutten?
John Rutten?
Rutten.
Oh yeah, I went to school with him.
You did?
Yeah.
How long did you know him?
Gosh, I went to school in, went to UCLA in 1978 I started and, met him at school, at the dorms.
Mm-hmm. Were you guys friends, close friends?
Yeah, we're very close friends.
Yeah.
I mean, what's this all about?
Well, it's a case we're working on. It involves John, and in there, some of the statements we reviewed, there's notes and stuff that he knew you and stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, we good friends. Lived in the dorms I lived in the dorms for 2 years.
You guys lived in the same dorm?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Dykstra.
Okay. Were you guys just friends or anything else, or?
Yeah, we were good friends.
Yeah. Was there ever any relationship or anything that developed between you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we dated.
Uh-huh.
I mean, what's this all about?
Well, it's relating to his wife.
Okay.
Okay. Did you know her?
Not really. I mean, I knew that he got married years ago.
Uh-huh. Did you ever meet her?
God, I don't know.
Do you know who she was or anything?
Well, let me think. God, it's been a long time ago. I may have met her. Geez.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you. You said you dated John. How long did you guys date?
I mean, are you guys, is this something, I mean, you said I was going to interview somebody about art, and how you guys are,
here's
I mean,
Stephanie, here's the situation. Is basically, we knew that this, when we saw this in this chrono, that maybe, there was some relationship there. That's what the chrono seemed to indicate, and we didn't want to come up to you at your desk and ask those kinds of questions or do anything. You know how up there people can see what's going on if you go into an interview room or people are in there getting supplies.
Okay. I mean,
so we wanted to afford you some privacy, some confidentiality to talk about this, because we thought it might be, something, you're married to someone else, obviously, and so forth, and that you may not want to, talk about these things in that setting where someone, we don't want the rumor mill or gossip or any of that kind of stuff
I mean,
to start.
that's fine. I mean,
so we did this just as a means to try and speak to you in just a confidential place where where your business isn't out there for other people and your division to know about.
God, that's been a million years ago. I mean, what year is it now? 2009. I mean, I graduated in 82. 82, yeah. We dated. I dated other guys. I'm sure he dated other girls.
Well, let me ask you, roughly how long would you say you guys dated?
Oh, jeez.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because from what you're telling me is you guys dated while you were in college together, right?
Yeah, and probably after college. I can't.
Well, let me ask you, what ended the relationship between you and John?
I don't. It was kind of a weird relationship. We just, it just didn't work out. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It was like I went out with other guys, saw other guys, and went on lots of vacations. And
once you guys split, were you guys still friends, or kind of,
I mean,
problems? Is it friendly, not friendly?
No, I don't think it was not friendly. I mean, we were friendly. I know that we went to Hawaii at one point. Another friend of mine who's actually dying right now went to Hawaii with us at some point.
Remember roughly when that was?
Oh, geez. Let me think.
The detectives began by gently prodding Stephanie's memory, allowing her to share more about her past experiences. As Stephanie confessed her connection with John, the conversation naturally shifted toward Sherry. They asked Stephanie to recall her memories of Sherry and questioned her about the peculiarities of their interaction, such as the unexpected visits and incidents that could link her to the murder.
Do you remember her name or anything, or? Or what she did for a living, or where she worked, or anything about her?
Well, I think I'm going to say that I think she was a nurse. Man, I can't even remember how he said he met her. I mean, it's been so long ago.
Well, let me ask you, did you go to their wedding,
No, I didn't go to their wedding. No, did not go to their wedding. I don't understand why you're talking about some guy I dated a million years ago.
Well, do you know what happened to his wife?
Yeah, I know she got killed.
What did you hear about that?
I saw a poster at work. I'm sure I spoke to him about it. I think I spoke to another friend of his about it.
But you're not sure where he moved to after he got married?
No idea. I mean,
Never went over to visit him or
I don't think.
meet
I
his
mean, I don't
wife or-
think so. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I did. I mean, I know he lived on Roscoe for a long, long time. I mean, I may know. I mean, he may have told me where they lived, somewhere in the valley. I mean, he may have said I lived over such and such, but I couldn't tell you specifically where.
But you don't remember specifically ever going over to visit him or visit them at wherever he moved when he left Roscoe?
I honestly, I don't know. I don't think so, but
Okay.
you know, I don't want to say no, I don't think so, and then he says, oh yeah, she came over for something, dropped something off. You know, I don't know.
So if you did go over there, it'd just be like a quick thing, like you're saying, drop something off, or
Maybe.
But you don't remember as far as like going there to have dinner or like a social, anything at the house, party?
Well, if you guys know something, I can't. I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, but
After John's wife died, you said you may have been talking to him. Did your relationship start up again?
I would say no.
Throughout the interview, Stephanie became increasingly tense and defensive whenever questioned about Sherry, and attempted to deny any recollection of their past interactions. Despite her efforts to deflect and evade, Stephanie inadvertently revealed enough information about their history. Now it was time for the detectives to reveal the truth to her.
Well, on some of the, on this case, you know, this occurred in '86, right? Detectives processed the scene, things of that nature. They did fingerprints and all that stuff. You know, well, you know the standard stuff. You've been doing this longer than I have.
Well, not about that. I got 26 years on, going on 26.
19, so. But, you know, as they processed everything, they did the best they could at that time, and they looked at a lot of people and different things in this case. And you're right.
I mean, if you guys are claiming that I'm a suspect, then you know I got a problem with with that.
Okay.
Okay, so you know if you're doing this as an interrogation, you're saying, hey, I'm a suspect. Well, now I got a problem with now you're accusing me of this. Is that what you're saying?
we're trying to figure out what happened, Stephanie.
Well, I'm just saying. Do I need to get a lawyer if you're accusing me of this? You
don't have to.
I'm just,
you're here of your own free will.
No, I know, but
you're not under arrest. You can walk out.
You can leave whenever you like.
Well,
but,
I'm trying to give you some background of how I knew him, and now you're telling me that somebody's saying that we had this big old fight, and I don't even know what you're talking about. And I don't want to get in trouble for something that I didn't even do, or you're saying I did something.
Okay.
We understand.
I mean, how would you guys like it if the tables were turned on you?
I understand. No.
No, that's what we're telling you. You're free to go whenever you want. If this makes you uncomfortable and you want to,
now you're starting to make me uncomfortable.
The thing is, detectives did what they could at that time on the crime scene. Okay, and the burglary thing you're talking about, that is an angle that they looked at. But now we're looking at everything else on the case, because nobody was ever arrested on the case.
I don't know that or not.
Okay. Now, what we'd like to do is, obviously, you know about all the DNA stuff and things of the nature that gets done on cases nowadays. If we asked you for a DNA swab, would you be willing to give us one?
Maybe. Because now
because
now I'm thinking I probably need to talk to a lawyer.
Okay.
Because I know how this stuff works. Okay, don't get me wrong. You're right. I have been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
And I wish I had been recording this because now it sounds like there's. You're selling these people saying I'm fighting with her, and now it sounds like you're trying to. I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, we know.
Okay. And now it almost sounds like you're trying to pin something on me.
No,
now I got that sense.
Well, what it gets to on these cases, and you know it as well as I do, our job is to identify and eliminate suspects.
I can't believe this.
So if we ask you to the point to give us a DNA sample, a buccal swab, so we can identify or eliminate you, would you be willing to do that?
Maybe. Because I know this.
Well, that's where we're at too. Because right now, from looking at the evidence, it's, it's possible we may have some DNA at the location.
That's great.
And we're going to do what we can to try to put this thing together. And your name's in the book. These people are pointing at you for whatever reason.
I don't know why.
And-
That's just crazy. I mean, that's absolutely crazy.
And it would be irresponsible on our part not to look at it.
I know. You guys have to do your job,
And,
and I guess I'm going to have to contact somebody. So,
That's fair.
I mean, because I know how this stuff works. I
Sure.
mean, I just can't believe it.
I mean, we understand that. I mean, if we were in your position, I mean, we would feel the same way.
I just can't even believe it. I mean, it's just, I mean, I'm shocked. I'm really shocked that somebody would be saying that I did this. I mean, we had a fight, and so I went and killed her. I mean, come on.
Well,
That's,
okay.
All right.
well, thanks for giving me the courtesy. I wish I-
After the interrogation, Stephanie was allowed to leave, but as she reached the end of the corridor, several policemen were waiting for her with handcuffs. It was a dramatic moment, marking 23 years since the murder, as Stephanie was finally arrested. Even during the official questioning, she invoked her right to remain silent and adamantly denied any involvement, maintaining her innocence. With no confession forthcoming, the detectives had no option but to prepare the necessary documents for her transfer to court. Stephanie spent the next few years in a women's prison until her first court hearing that commenced in 2012. During the trial, the defense raised doubts about the DNA test results and highlighted the lack of prior suspicions against Stephanie. However, these arguments failed to convince the court. The prosecution presented their theory, alleging that on the day of the murder, Stephanie waited for John to leave for work before entering Sherry's apartment. Once inside, she confronted Sherry, which resulted in a struggle that moved downstairs. Ultimately, Stephanie incapacitated Sherry by breaking a vase over her head before fatally shooting her. Then she staged a fake burglary scene to cover her tracks and left the scene after taking their marriage certificate. In her house, they stumbled upon a journal from the mid-1980s filled with entries detailing her love for John and her distress over his relationship with Sherry. However, there was no mention of her gun being stolen. Additionally, her computer history revealed multiple searches for John's name during the late 1990s. These findings added weight to the prosecution's case, painting a clearer picture of Stephanie's obsession with John and her potential motives for the crime. On March 8, 2012, Stephanie's fate was sealed as the jury declared her guilty of murder. The courtroom fell silent as the judge handed down a sentence of 27 years to life in prison, with an additional 2 years for using a service weapon. Stephanie was finally behind bars, and John had moved on with his life. It's tragic to think that she took Sherry's life and ruined 3 lives in the process. But for what? In the end, Stephanie's attempts to make John love her were futile, and now she finds herself unhappy as well. If it weren't for dedicated detectives who took up the case, Sherry's story might have remained buried in dusty archives. But thanks to their expertise and the power of DNA evidence, justice was finally served. Sherry's parents finally found solace knowing that the person who took their daughter away from them was behind bars.